You know, when I do my Millennial series, I'm actually reporting the news. I write it in a way that's a little bit more inventive, and it's a story that includes several different news stories, but I change all the names to Carla and Steve, Shaniqua, Chad. You know, if you're up on today's memes and jokes, you'll understand all of the stories. The best possible thing that you could do to help my channel out is to watch the entire video. Actually, watching it a couple of times would really help. If not, if you could donate $20, that'd be great. PayPal.me/Shakaama. I am going through a really hard time. I've been trying to apply for government, not handouts, but stuff like business loans and stuff like that. I'm waiting to see if anything's going to come of it, right? Carla leaves Steve for good. I'm sure if you're up on your gossip, you already know who I'm talking about. But it's also intermingled with a couple of other stories as well. Everybody in it is a different news story. Carla is one news story. Steve is another news story. Steve having a little kid is a different news story. And Karen is another news story also. It would be cool if you could figure out which story is which and tell me in the comments. I change all the names to make sure I don't get sued or anything like that. You with me? You ready for this one? Meet Carla. She's young. She got married to Steve and had a baby by Steve. All of those facts are uncontested. Steve is a great husband. Steve is a great dad. Steve isn't manly somehow, according to Carla. He stays at home and plays video games for a living. Now, from the outside looking in, you'd think Steve was amazing. Steve lives in a big house with big land around it. Can't get that much these days, even a big house, and you'll have no land. You'd think Carla knocked it out of the park by finding and convincing Steve to marry her. Carla's nothing to look at, so how did she do it? Her friends ask. But Carla is unhappy. At least, that's what she told Steve. She said, "We don't do things anymore." Steve said, "We just flew to Paris for lunch last week with your mom watching the kid." Steve left the conversation scratching his head, wondering what had gone on. When he told his mother about the conversation, the first thing she said was, "She's found someone else. Mark my words, she's found someone else." Steve didn't think so, but he stowed that reaction away in the back of his mind. One woman's reaction to another woman's actions. About a week later, though, Steve was at home, alone. Carla had just left, and he had put baby boy away for a nap, and he went to stream. He had 2 hours before preparing for his son's meal. He was just preparing to click start on his new live stream when he heard the front door close. He dare not yell out to Carla for fear of waking the baby. Maybe she had left something? He quietly walked through the house. Coming down the hall with Steve Jr. in her arms was Carla's big-breasted friend. You know, this could have been my baby. This should have been my baby. But through circumstances of mistaken identity, I just thought you were some nerd. And ugly Carla swooped in and stole you from me, she said gingerly, caressing Steve Jr. in her arms. You're Karen, or something like that, right? You're Carla's friend, right? If I remember correctly, you were dating Chad, the one with the big one, I hear, through the grapevine. How did you get in here? Steve said, prying the still sleeping Steve Jr. from her arms. I'm Stacy. You were so close. We have so much in common. I used the key under the potted plant at the door. Steve, I've been in here many, many times. I've had some wild times in your mansion. All the boys, Carla and we girls have had right in your living room floor. I think you were home sometimes. This little one probably exhausted you to the point you were passed out upstairs. It was so exciting for us. 5 of us, 12 of them. But don't worry. This one is yours for sure. She only started that after the baby. I think she had that postpartum stuff, Stacy said, following Steve to the nursery. I told her she should just leave you alone. You'd reject her if she ever found out, Stacy whispered, caressing Steve's shoulder and leaning over the crib as he put Steve Jr. in it. I have to get back to work, Karen. Key, please? He gently removed her arm from around him and held out his hand. She smiled and placed the key in his hand and curled it up while giving him a peck on the cheek. It took all of his strength not to deck her right then and there in the nursery. Instead, he smiled and walked her to the door. She kissed him on the cheek again, her big breasts intentionally rubbing against his chest. She rubbed off the lipstick and slipped out the door. Carla came home. Steve and Steve Jr. were in the kitchen being fed. Why are all my bags packed at the door? Carla shouted. It scared little Steve. Without missing a spoonful, Steve continued feeding Steve Jr. Your friend Karen came by. What? Carla was confused. Your friend Karen came by, Steve said again. I don't have a friend named Karen? She was lost in thought. The one with the giant knockers. We had a nice confessional conversation, Steve said, never taking his eyes off of little Steve. See, this is why you're crazy. Her name is Stacy. We've been friends since high school. I'm done. I can't handle you anymore. You're always doing something, she ranted and raved. And why are my bags packed at the door? I'm the one that stays. The woman always stays. Steve continued to feed little Steve. Oh, the woman always stays. You forget. This house is a rental, and I don't even pay for it. You've never paid attention to anything I do. You just saw a big house. You married me. I told you for the past 2 years I was broke. What I do have is a lawyer. If you want to pick up the tab for this house, it's $20,000 a month. I haven't made that in 5 years. But you keep thinking this is a man-woman thing. You keep forgetting you are a singer, and I'm just a nerd. On paper, you're worth about $50 million. I'm worth about $50,000. I thought you were seeing someone else, but I find out from your good friend Karen that you're not seeing anyone individually. But you haven't kept your vows. You say you're bored of me. You say I'm crazy. If I put my nerd brain to it and put 2 and 2 together, I see I can't compete with bodybuilder men dancing around the living room nude and the estrogen flowing through your body right now. Granted, I understand that part, but your actions are your actions. I could forgive a little craziness, but you went off the deep end. Do you see all these cameras around the house? They're kept by an off-site company to watch me, to make sure nothing happens to me. When I call them up, they pulled all the videos of you and your friends right here in the living room. In fact, they had them already categorized for me. They also supplied copies to my lawyer. They weren't ever going to say anything, but when your friend Karen came over, who is also on video, recorded, confessing what all of you girls did, they knew I was about to call. Go be a rich singer with your people. I'll be here with Steve Jr., Steve finished. As the door was slamming, he yelled, have those alimony and child support checks ready. In the news, Carla was praised for leaving Steve. Women were upset she had to give him half her fortune and pay alimony. I said Steve brought nothing to the table for the marriage. Why should he get half? Why should he be paid alimony? Steve makes sure Steve Jr. is fed every 3 hours. He's checked and changed regularly. and he's exercised daily. They do flashcards. They make sure that his mind is sharp, that he exercises walking, talking. They do little baby homeschooling every day. He, his mom, and his dad, or grandma and granddad, come over to play with little Steve Jr. He also got a permanent restraining order against Stacy, the one he subtly insulted by calling her Karen all the time. Thank you all for watching, and if you made it this far, leave a comment saying, her big-breasted friend. Thank you.